Level 1. The slip. It happens on a Tuesday. They always happen on a Tuesday. You're at a press conference. Routine stuff. Infrastructure bill, some questions about the economy, a photo opportunity with a visiting delegation from a country you had to look up on a map this morning. You've done 100 of these. You could do them in your sleep. You were almost doing this one in your sleep. You meant to say our valued partners in the Pacific. What came out was something adjacent to that, but not quite that. Close enough that for half a second nobody reacts. Then the journalist in the third row makes a face. Then your press secretary makes a face. Then your chief of staff, watching from the side of the room, closes his eyes in the specific way that means you have just created work for everyone. The clip is on Twitter within 4 minutes. A late-night host has written a monologue around it by 6 p.m. By the time you sit down for dinner, it has 12 million views and a dedicated subreddit thread titled Just Presidential Things. Your communications team calls it a momentary lapse. Your opponents call it a window into your competence. Neither characterization is entirely fair. Both will be repeated endlessly. You issue a clarification. The clarification gets less coverage than the original slip. That's always how it works. The correction never travels as far as the mistake. By Thursday, it's mostly forgotten. A journalist brings it up at the next press conference and you laugh it off smoothly and everyone moves on. Almost everyone. The clip lives forever on the internet in the way that embarrassing things live forever on the internet. Dormant for months and then resurrected at the worst possible moment by someone with too much time and a very good memory. You'll see it again. You don't know when, but you'll see it again. Level 2. The meme. You have become a format, not a joke, not a moment, a format, a template, a reusable unit of internet culture that people apply to new situations on a daily basis with a creativity and consistency that would be impressive if it weren't happening to you personally. It started with the slip. Then someone put the audio over a video of a cat falling off a table and it got 3 million likes. Then someone made a deep fake version where you say it in different languages. Then it became a sound on TikTok that 17-year-olds use to describe minor inconveniences in their own lives. Then a software company used a reference to it in a tweet, and their social media manager got praised for being relatable. Your grandchildren will know about this. That is not a metaphor. Historians of internet culture will reference it in academic papers with titles you don't want to read. It will appear in a documentary about your presidency that you will watch alone in a room and turn off after 11 minutes. The meme itself is harmless. That's what your team keeps telling you. It's harmless. Nobody actually votes based on memes. The polling is fine. Your approval rating hasn't moved. What they don't tell you, what nobody tells you, but what you feel every time you walk into a room full of people who are trying very hard not to think about it, is that the meme has changed something subtle about how people see you. Not dramatically, just slightly. A half-degree shift in the angle at which the public holds your image. You are now, in some small but permanent way, the president who did the thing. Whatever else you do, whatever legislation passes, whatever crises you navigate, whatever your legacy ultimately becomes, you will also always be that. You smile for the cameras. You've gotten very good at smiling for the cameras. Level 3. The diplomatic incident. It was supposed to be a routine summit. The G7, beautiful location, everyone in good suits, handshakes and group photographs, and carefully worded joint statements that took 6 months of staff work to produce, and that nobody outside diplomatic circles will ever read. Ceremonial diplomacy. You've done it before. You know how it goes. What you didn't know was that the bilateral meeting with the French president would go the way it went. The details depend on who you ask. Your team has one version, the French have another, and the version that leaked to Le Monde is somewhere between both and worse than either. What is not disputed is that you said something, or implied something, or failed to say something, at a moment when saying it was considered non-negotiable by the other side, and the French president left the room 30 minutes early and did not appear in the group photograph. The French ambassador was summoned, or your ambassador was summoned to Paris. Again, depends who you ask. Your press secretary spent 45 minutes at the podium describing what happened as a frank and productive exchange of views with the specific facial expression of someone defusing a bomb while pretending there is no bomb. NATO issued a statement. The statement said nothing, but said it very carefully. 3 senators from your own party released a joint letter expressing concern. In Washington, a senator expressing concern is the diplomatic equivalent of someone at a dinner party quietly clearing their throat. It means something is wrong and nobody wants to be the first to say what. The French got over it eventually. Alliances are resilient things built to survive exactly this kind of moment. But resilient is not the same as undamaged, and undamaged is not the same as unchanged. You tweeted that the relationship between the United States and France has never been stronger. Nobody replied to that tweet with anything you wanted to read. Level 4. The scandal. This one doesn't go away in a week. The story broke on a Friday evening, which means someone timed it carefully. Friday news dumps are for things people want noticed but not examined too closely over a full news cycle. Except this particular story was examined very closely over a very full news cycle because it had everything: documents, sources, a timeline that raised questions your office answered poorly, and then answered differently, and then stopped answering entirely pending legal review. You don't need to know the specific details of the scandal to understand how a presidential scandal works because they all follow the same arc with depressing consistency. The story, the denial, the modified denial, the acknowledgement that something happened but context is important. The revelation that the context doesn't help as much as hoped. The staff member who resigns to spend more time with their family. The congressional inquiry. The special counsel whose name you will hear every single morning for the next 14 months. Your approval rating drops 7 points in 1 week. 7 points sounds like a number until you understand that 7 points is millions of people, and those millions of people are not evenly distributed, and the ones you're losing are in 3 specific states that you need in 18 months. Your family is watching the news coverage. You told them not to watch the news coverage. They're watching the news coverage. The lawyers are very expensive and very calm and keep telling you the process takes time and to trust the process. You are paying them enough money that you would like slightly more than trust the process, but that appears to be what's available. You go to the Oval Office at 6 a.m. and sit at the desk that Lincoln sat at and Roosevelt sat at and Kennedy sat at, and you think about how every single one of them had a version of this and most of them got through it. Most of them. Level 5. The economy. The decision made sense at the time. You need to believe that because the alternative, that it never made sense and you did it anyway, is not something you can sit with at 3 a.m. when the numbers come in. The tariffs, the rate decision, the spending package, the deregulation bill. Whatever it was, it moved through the appropriate channels, cleared the appropriate hurdles, was signed with the appropriate ceremony and the appropriate pen set that gets distributed to the appropriate people as souvenirs. Your economic advisors presented projections. The projections were optimistic. Projections are always optimistic. That's what projections are for. 6 months later, the optimism is not visible in the data. Inflation is up. Not dramatically, not catastrophically, but enough that people feel it at the grocery store and the gas station and the places where people feel economic reality before economists finish measuring it. Consumer confidence is down. The Dow had 3 bad weeks in a row, and cable news treated each one as a personal referendum on your fitness for office, which is not how economics works, but is absolutely how cable news works. The jobs report came out on a Friday. Your press secretary called it a complex picture reflecting global headwinds. The opposition called it a jobs report. Both descriptions were accurate. Only one of them trended on Twitter. 3 Nobel laureates wrote an open letter. 1 supported your position, 2 didn't. The 2 got more coverage. That's not bias, it's just that 2 is more than 1, and bad news travels faster than good news and has done since before Nobel Prizes existed. Your approval on economic issues drops to 38%. You were elected partly on economic competence. 38% is not competence. 38% is a number your team shows you on a slide in a windowless room and then sits quietly while you look at it. The midterms are 14 months away. 14 months is both a very long time for an economy to recover and a very short time for voters to forget. You sign an executive order, you give a speech, you visit a factory in Ohio and shake hands with workers and say the word resilient 11 times. The numbers don't move. Level 6. The impeachment. The letter arrived with 218 signatures. 218 is the number you need for a majority in the House of Representatives. The number on the letter was 218. Not 217, not 221, exactly 218, which means someone counted very carefully and wanted you to know they had counted very carefully, and that there was no margin for misunderstanding what the letter meant. Your party held 23 of those signatures. You read that number several times. Then you called your chief of staff. Then you called your lawyer. Then you sat very still for a period of time that your staff later described to journalists as the president taking a moment to review the situation. The articles of impeachment were introduced on a Monday. The charges were read into the congressional record by a congresswoman from a district you lost by 31 points, and who has wanted to do this since approximately the first week of your presidency. She read them clearly and without visible emotion, which was somehow worse than if she had seemed angry. The process is constitutional. You know it's constitutional. You've said publicly that you respect the constitutional process. What you did not fully appreciate when you said that was how it feels to be the subject of the constitutional process. The hearings, the witnesses, the documents subpoenaed from people you trusted, the televised testimony of your former staff members who chose their words with the careful precision of people who had been extensively prepared by their own lawyers. Your approval rating is 36%. Your disapproval is 58%. 6% have no opinion, which feels like its own kind of verdict. The Senate trial is coming. You need 34 senators to vote against conviction. You have 38 who have committed. Committed is not the same as voted. Committed is what senators say before they see which way the wind is blowing on the day of the vote. You give a speech from the Oval Office. You talk about the American people and the democratic process and your absolute confidence in the truth. You have given versions of this speech before. You have never given it in these circumstances. The 38 senators watch it on television. Level 7. The war. Nobody wanted this. You need to believe that too. The situation had been deteriorating for months. Everyone agreed on that. But deteriorating situations deteriorate gradually and then suddenly, and the suddenly part arrived on a Tuesday morning at 5:47 a.m. when your national security advisor called and used the specific tone of voice. That means you need to be in the situation room immediately. And you need to bring the people who handle the things that can't be discussed on a phone. You authorized a response. The response was proportional. That word proportional will be used approximately 400 times in the next 72 hours by people who will mean very different things by it. The other side responded to your proportional response with their own response, which they also called proportional, and which your military advisors called something else entirely. Congress was briefed. Some members supported you, some didn't. The ones who didn't had been against it before it started, and the ones who did will be against it by month 3 if things go the way things tend to go. American soldiers are deployed. That sentence has a weight that no other sentence in the English language carries in quite the same way when you are the person who signed the order. You read the casualty reports every morning before anything else. Your staff tried to summarize them once. You told them never to summarize them again. You read every name. The protests started in week 2. Not everywhere, not everyone, but enough people in enough cities that the aerial footage becomes a recurring image in the news coverage alongside the footage from the conflict itself. History will decide whether you were right. You won't be there when history decides. Your approval rating is 31%. It was 47% 18 months ago. The distance between those two numbers is measured in decisions and consequences, and the particular loneliness of a job where the hardest choices have no good options, only less bad ones. And you make them anyway because someone has to, and you're the one who asked for the job. You visit the wounded at Walter Reed on a Thursday, you shake hands and you say things and you mean every word, and none of it is enough, and you know it and they know it, and everyone in the room knows it. You fly back to Washington. There are more decisions waiting. There are always more decisions waiting. Level 8. The button. The call comes at 3:17 a.m. Not a metaphorical call. An actual call on an actual phone from the actual people whose job it is to make this call when this specific situation arises. You've been briefed on this call. You've run the scenarios. You've sat in rooms where serious people walked you through decision trees that all eventually led to this moment, and you nodded and asked the right questions, and somewhere in the back of your mind you filed it under things that happened to other presidents. The assessment is confirmed. This is not a drill. The words, "this is not a drill," are spoken by a person whose voice is entirely steady because they have trained for this moment with a thoroughness that your entire life has not prepared you for. You have 18 minutes. 18 minutes between detection and impact. 18 minutes to verify, decide, and respond. The football is open. The codes are real. The generals are on the line and their voices are steady too, because everyone in this moment is steady except possibly you, and you cannot afford to be the one who isn't. You think about the decision that started this, the response that led to the escalation, that led to the counter-escalation, that led to the miscalculation that led to this phone call at 3:17 a.m. The chain of events is perfectly clear in retrospect and completely irrelevant right now. You think about the 330 million people who went to sleep tonight in a country that was at peace when they closed their eyes. You think about the other side, their 3:17 a.m., their 18 minutes, their president holding their version of this moment. You make a decision, you don't know if it's the right one. There may not be a right one. There hasn't been a right one for a while now, just a series of less wrong ones that somehow led here anyway. The generals execute the order. Somewhere, radar screens light up. You sit in the situation room and you wait, and the world you were elected to lead has approximately 16 minutes left in the shape it was in when you took office. And you are the last president who will have known it that way. The phone is very quiet. 18 minutes is a very short time.